So we're talking about character, and it's said that that's what you are when nobody's looking. I think there's absolute truth to that. Character is what you are when you think you could get away with things that you are not to be. And character is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. Also, though, we say that sometimes in a way that it makes it seem as if the fact that we're better people when we're around other people is somehow a weakness. That's not true. That's by design. God has designed the church in such a way that we are there for each other, that we encourage and strengthen and build each other up to be the best of what we can be. It's not a bad thing that you're a better person when you're around your spouse. That's a good thing. That's why God gave that person to you. It's not a bad thing that you're a better person when you're around your kids. That's a good thing. That's you living up to a calling that God has given you as a father or a mother. It's not a bad thing if being seen holds you accountable and makes you do the right thing. That's why accountability is there. It's why things are seen. That's a good thing. But God does call us to do the right thing and to say the right thing and to be the right person. Boy, that just caught. So I got the same thing you did. Gnats. There's gnats. Who's the Egyptian that brought those? So anyway, God has called us to be the people who are people of integrity, people who are of character, people who are of a godly nature in every time, not just in the seen times, not just in the supported times, not just in the encouraged times. And that's not always easy, is it? If it's always been easy for you, then maybe you misunderstood the assignment and sinned without knowing it. Because as a human, we've gotten it wrong. Okay, there are lots of times where we've caved, or we weren't sure what the right thing was to do, and that wasn't the one we picked, or we just flat wanted the wrong thing. We've all been there. There's none of us who hasn't, and that's why we're here this morning. God has forgiven us of those times. God brings us grace in those times. He brings us mercy in those times, but He also calls us better next time, right? And so part of what this series is, every Christian knows we're supposed to have good character. Every Christian knows we're supposed to be people of integrity. Every Christian needs to be reminded. Every Christian needs to be strengthened and have their resolve strengthened. And every Christian, if they're not careful, needs to be reminded of the dangerous power of small drifts, of small bad decisions. There's really not any such thing as a white lie. All lies are lies. They were small to you. Sometimes that itself was a fail in your character, that you felt that was a small lie. You see what I mean? So we're going to talk about truth and lies and integrity and all that kind of stuff today. So there's really probably more layers to integrity than this, but there are two that are really if we were going to oversimplify it down to two. There are two, okay, that we're going to look at today. And the first layer that I want to look at, because both of them are incredibly, I'm going to put my timer on, because there ain't nobody been up here this morning yet who did. So I was counting you. All right. There are two kinds of integrity. And the first one I want to look at is this one, and that is our integrity and our honesty toward other people, just telling the truth about who you are, what you've done, who they are, what they've done, what's going on. Tell the truth, that sort of a thing. And we know how important this is, okay? For one thing, there is no marriage that lasts, that is any good, that isn't built on honesty with each other. It's not just important. People, communication and honesty are important. Understatement. Communication and honesty are essential. Essential like water is to your bones. You need your spouse, your children, yourself to be honest. I went to a retreat a while back. I've told you a couple of things I learned at that retreat. One of the things wasn't a thing I learned, but I loved the quote that I heard several times over and over again at different times in different applications. And that was simply this: to receive radical grace, there must be radical honesty. To receive radical grace, there must be radical honesty. Being honest with yourself, being honest with others, just simply telling the truth. And sometimes that's so hard for people that they have lied to themselves for years and even come to believe their own lies about themselves, or in some cases about others, or about God Himself. about life itself. And they've missed, because of that, grace that could have been theirs, grace they could have extended to others, grace they could have enjoyed together before God, because they just couldn't get the honesty there. Honesty is fundamental. It's not just fundamental in terms of receiving grace. It's fundamental in terms of pleasing God. If you really believe in God, if you have faith in God, and without faith, it's impossible to please God. Well, part of that finding it possible to please God, of course, is grace. But grace only comes when we start to speak the truth. Some of those things are confession. God, here's who I know I've been. Here's what I know I've done. And God, I need you. There's no way through this without you. Just a confession. That is not just optional. That's essential to the health of our souls, our eternal health of our souls. And that's why it's so important that God, when He tells us, this is how you come to me, this is how you find grace in Jesus Christ. Yes, He talks about baptism. Yes, He talks about faith itself. And again, no faith, none of it matters. But right sandwiched in there, as important as the confession that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, is the confession that I, James, am a sinner in need of Christ, who is the Son of God. They're inseparable. Both. You could use the terms essential in terms of, well, do you have to do that to be saved? I think we're always asking the wrong question when we ask that. Has God called us to this in our salvation? And the answer to that will always and ever be yes. It's that integral, that's the better word, to our salvation, that we are honest about who we are and our need for Jesus. Well, that some people can find easier than day-to-day honesty. So I want to challenge you in this. The honesty first comes before God, but then God says, and I want you to be honest with one another. That's why several times Paul writes to the early church and says, I want you to put off all falsehood, all of it. And then Christians immediately in Sunday schools start saying, well, but does he mean that I can't tell this kind of a lie? What did he say? You ever wonder? But that's the preacher in me coming out. I'm so tired of that question. But can I lie when? No. Okay? No. You tell the truth, because this is God's nature, and anything that is not of truth is against God's nature. Okay? No one may ever know, though, James. Then do you believe in God? The all-seeing, all-knowing, not in a guilt sense. I'm not trying to get you guilty, but some of you are. But I mean, you know what I'm saying. You and the Spirit work that one out. That's His job, not mine. God sees, God hears, and God knows. We joke about parents with eyes in the back of their head, and parents do always seem to know way more than kids ever give them credit for knowing. Some of us use that as a strength. That's a superpower. You don't think I know, that sort of a deal. But parents know nothing. You can quote me on this in whatever context you want. Parents know nothing compared to what God knows. So what we say and how we say it, and if we say it or don't say it, it does get seen. It does get heard. It is known. And it's not meant for us to then have a relationship with God where we're constantly in fear of Him. It's meant for us to have a relationship with God to say, God, since I love you and I know you, I want to please you, and I know there's no way I can hide this from you, help me do the right thing. Help me know how to handle this. Help me know how to say this in the best way. And you go from there. And you have then a spirit of integrity. Since as Christians, we all claim to be people of the truth, right? So that's how we get there, is by developing in ourselves that character. There's a few passages I want to look at. The first couple are in the book of Proverbs. Of course, Proverbs does speak a lot to character, and it does speak a lot to honesty. Let me see. The first one was 21:6. I couldn't remember the order. I put them in. In verse 6 of chapter 21, there's several verse 6s today for some reason. We see this. Making a fortune. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. You know, how many of you would like to make a fortune? How many of you, like me, are in the wrong place to do that? Okay, that's by choice. That's not a complaint. That's by choice. And some of you, it's by choice. Some of you are teachers by choice, social workers by choice, nurses by choice. You're in jobs that you know you're not ever going to get rich in money, but you will in many other ways and in eternity. But this is what he says to his sons, because Solomon actually, he wanted to be rich, and apparently quite successful at that. So, making a fortune through a lying tongue is a vanishing mist and a pursuit of death. I'm going to read that one again. And I want you to think about what you do for a living, and whether this is about you or whether this is about your profession in general. I want you to ask yourself this question. Do you or do many in your field live by this truth or live by the lie it's exposing? And so go back again. Making a fortune through a lying tongue is a vanishing mist, a pursuit of death. You work in a field where it's difficult to tell the truth? Do you work in a field where you're able to and keep your integrity, but you're like the outcast because you tell the truth? I'm sure some of you do. I'm sure for some of you this is a daily issue. And here's my prayer for you, that you have not given up and given in and just followed along. Because what does he say you're pursuing if you do? Death. What death is he talking about? What about Revelation 21:8? Where do people who live by lies end up in eternity? We don't like to talk about it, so I just like to call it New Jersey. You know that. But it's worse than New Jersey. It's New Jersey with El Paso weather, okay? What would that be? Cleveland on a hot day. It's not good, is it? Separate from God, separate from blessings. You may have made a little money here, but what have you made in eternity? You're chasing death, he says. John 8:44, when you speak lies, or Satan is the father of all lies, and when you speak lies, you speak his native tongue. The Bible does not mince words. The Bible doesn't talk about this like it's not a big deal. The world talks like it's not a big deal, and as Christians, sometimes we get sucked into the world. You see the problem? Because it gets us chasing death and not life. And when we put our faith in Christ, when we've been baptized into Christ, Scripture says we've crossed over from death to life. So in this context, you could say easily, we have crossed over from lies to truth, from a life of dishonesty to a life of honesty, a life of lack of integrity to a life of integrity. In chapter 26, this is also verse 6, that's what I thought. The one who sends a message, this is not right. Thank you, 28. I'm looking at the wrong page, my bookmark's in the wrong spot. Thank you. I'm telling you, my allergies are up here just buzzing this morning. I don't know what's in the air. Better a poor person who lives with integrity than the rich one who distorts right and wrong. Better a poor person who lives with integrity than the rich one who distorts right and wrong. Does honesty matter to the Lord? Is the eternity going to be different for people who live by honesty or dishonesty? Is it going to be different for people who live with integrity or lack thereof? Yeah. Your entire eternity will be different. Your relationship with God can be made or broken on your character and your integrity and your honesty. Because to God, lies aren't just a small thing. To God, lies are Satan's native tongue, and when we speak it, we speak Satan's language. And how do you feel when people betray you that deeply? You see? It's no small matter, not at all. One other passage I want to look at is in Psalm 84, and it's verses 11 and 12. We looked at this passage just the other day as our call to worship. And the last couple of verses of this psalm speak to honesty and integrity and some blessings. So back to the positive side of things. So we've seen how God feels about lying. We've seen how the writers of Proverbs, not all that was written by, I think, chapter 28 was somebody else, but Solomon and others, how they viewed honesty and dishonesty. And of course, that's led by the Spirit in the book of Proverbs. Well, what is the promise if we're honest? Okay, we want to see both sides of the coin. We don't want to just be a motivation of, well, I don't want to go to hell. What's the positive reason for this? Look at this. He says, for the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord grants favor and honor. He does not withhold good from those who live with integrity. Happy is the person who trusts in you, Lord of armies. Read it again. I'm going to read them all twice today. For the Lord God is a sun and shield, and the Lord grants favor and honor, and He does not withhold good from those who live with integrity. This morning, who wouldn't want to say that you live in the favor and the honor of God? Who wouldn't want to know for sure that they were somebody that God is actively working to bless, that He's actively working to answer your prayers, He's actively working to bless your family? And what does He say is one of the ways you can get that blessing? Be honest. Be a person of integrity. Be a person of your word. Be somebody where your walk and your talk match. That's the other layer to integrity, isn't it? Okay? So one thing is that we speak the truth, and then we speak the truth to one another, which is an act of respect and an act of love toward that other person. Now, I know sometimes Satan gets on your shoulder, and he says, oh, if you love them, you won't tell them the truth. I'm going to tell you something. If you have gotten to a point in your life where with the people you love, you are more afraid of telling the truth than you are of lying. I'm not exaggerating here. I'm telling you this because I love you. You need to get right with God, because something is going on in your heart. I don't know what it is. Something's going on in your heart that you're more afraid of truth than of telling a lie, that you're more afraid of serving the Lord and being obedient than of being disobedient. And you need to wrestle with that. Don't let that become who you are, because that's what Revelation is talking about. This is people where that has just become who they are, where the first instinct is cover up and not honesty, where you lie about things where it's like it doesn't even make sense, like even from a worldly point of view. Even your non-Christian friends that are total heathens, because I'm sure we all have some, are sitting there looking at you and going, I can't believe you said that. What'd you do that for? When that becomes the norm, get right with God. Something's not right. There's something at the foundation level of who you are and in your heart you really need to work on. And that's not an accusation. That's actually, I'm serious, it's an encouragement for you to grow and to heal, because you have some things you need to be set free from. I guarantee you. I don't know what it is, but you need there's some kind of grace in there you're looking for, but you'll never find it in cover up. You never find it in cover up. All right? So let's go to the second thing, which that kind of starts to speak to. The second layer I want you to think about is your structural integrity. Okay? Engineering term, structural integrity. Here's the definition from an engineering thing, okay? Structural integrity is the ability of a component, structure, or asset to operate at optimum level under the pressure of a load, including the weight of the asset itself. I think that's really, even though this is talking about, things like building, you're talking trusses and things like that. This really speaks to who we are as people. We have a structural integrity to our heart. We have a level of strength and spiritual maturity that can handle certain things. And yes, Satan will put your structural integrity to a test. He will put things on you that will weigh you down and will pressure you and will stress you to the point that you are testing the structural integrity of your soul. Okay? That will happen. Sometimes he sidelines you in ways you just can't believe. But he's going to do that. Be ready. It's just guaranteed. Here's the thing. We learned in VBS about that, didn't we? The wise man builds his house upon the rock, right? Why? Well, because the rains come down and the floods go up. And what happens? Wise man's house stands firm. Wrong verse. Yeah. The foolish man. The foolish man, however, lacks structural integrity. He's not honest with himself. He's not honest with God. He's built his house on lies. And what happens? It's a house of cards. Doesn't take much to blow that thing over. We need to be people of great spiritual, structural integrity. And that begins with that first layer. You got to start telling the truth. No compromises. Going to tell the truth. You tell it tactfully at times. You tell it gently. There may be truths that you have to keep confidential. You don't lie to keep them confidential. Well, you have to. But you tell the truth. Scripture says you speak the truth, what? In love. In love. Find a way. You say, I don't know how to do that. That's why I lie. Learn. Add a new skill. Become spiritually healthy in the ways that you talk to people, in the ways that you deal with things. All right? This is the tallest building currently in the world. There's always something going up. You know, it won't be long probably till it's not. But the Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world. I put up a few little factoids about it. 163 floors. I'm curious. How many of you people are afraid of heights? Okay, so a lot of you afraid of heights. 163 floors. The highest I've been is 105 in a building. And that's pretty high up there. That's getting pretty tall. At the bottom of a building, 105 stories, you look up, and it feels like it, depending on how the clouds are moving, it feels like it's just about to fall over on you. That actually creeps me out way more than being up there. Standing at the bottom, because I'm thinking that could come down on me, you know, that sort of a deal. 163 floors. And the pool is on what, the 76th? Yes, the 76th floor. Anybody here been on a really high rooftop pool? Infinity pool, anything like that? Way, way, way back, we were on like the 25th floor, 26th floor in a pool. Well, this is when I was a kid at night, and that was really cool. Everybody was afraid to go over to the chain link fence and look over, the edge of the building. But it was very cool. 76th floor. Let me ask you something. You're on the 163rd floor, or you're swimming in the 76th floor. It really ain't going to make much difference. How much trust do you need to be able to have in the architects, the engineers, the builders, the thousands of workers who worked on that building, not to have lacked integrity? Floor 163, how much does your life depend on someone not using cut rate parts? If you've watched the news lately about Boeing, it's really sad. Boeing just not that long ago was at the absolute top of their game. They had a CEO whose aim was excellence in all things at every level, and he had brought Boeing back, and they were number one. They had a change of culture and a change of CEOs and a change of a lot of their leadership, and the new leadership is a cut corners leadership. And if you've been watching the news, you know what happened. I got off 2 flights last week, both of which were in the plane that Boeing's having all the troubles with. That was nice. That was nice. They were good flights. There was a little wonky moment where I went, what is this again? And I looked it up. That's how I know, because I was like, that feels like what they were talking about on the news. Oh, no wonder. And a plane that should have been very, very good isn't. Why? Cutting corners, not doing the engineering necessary, using software to make up for poor engineering and just plain lack of engineering, and all of those kinds of things. And at multiple levels, things went wrong. And so now they're in lawsuits. They've got canceled orders. I think last month they delivered something like 8 planes. How in the world do you run a company as expensive as Boeing on 8 planes? That's not good. Lack of integrity is where that came from. Now, they're not going to use those words because Wall Street doesn't like to throw those terms at people. Oh, you never call anybody a liar. You never call anybody a lack of integrity. It's a lack of integrity. They didn't put first what was meant to be first. And it's costing them. You're on floor 163. What kind of character do you want the engineers to have had? What kind of character do you want the contractors to have? What kind of character do you want the concrete company to have? The people who made the steel beams and girders. What do you want them to think when they do their job? You see how many hearts are involved? And we do this kind of stuff every single day where we trust. You go to the pharmacy and you buy your medication. How much do you need the people who provided that to have had integrity, and how much do you really trust that they did? See the problem? Even just a jar of mayonnaise. Does it matter if the people at that company have integrity or not? Well, if you don't want to approach the throne, then it matters how much integrity. You got it. It matters how much integrity the people at Hellman's have, doesn't it? Even the little things in life. It matters. It blew my mind. This was a couple years ago. I'm driving down the road, and this thought just starts coming to my mind of how much trust we put in people every single day. Now, I will say this. In order for things to work as well as they do, even as broken as they are, for things to work as well as they do, there's clearly more integrity in the world than we may think. Thank the Lord, not the whole world is in Congress. There is more integrity than we think, because there are people who show up every day, and they mix their concrete right, and there are people who show up every day, and they build their trusses right, and they show up every day, and they try to make sure that that's not going to give you food poisoning, and they try to do that every single day. There are those people out there, and there are probably billions of them out there, out of the several billion on the planet right now. Thank the Lord there are. But do you see how essential that is? And you see how quickly it becomes personal when one of those people is sticking a shot in your arm or a drill into your tooth or changing the brakes on your car. It matters, doesn't it? Teaching your kid in school. Integrity matters. And that layer of whether or not we are true to who we say we are really matters. If you're on that building, and by the way, I didn't read that last one. If you're riding a 40-mile-an-hour elevator down, man, I want to know you're honest. Okay? You better have fixed everything you said you fixed. Ooh, that's fast. I've been on some fast ones. I ain't done that. I love this quote. This is from Brene Brown. She's an author, writes about a lot of different things, a lot of character things. And this one I really like. I'm going to have to stand back to read this to you. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. Now I want to look at that last line, rather than simply professing them. We have to be people who are what we say we are. It's not now just a matter of telling the truth. At this level of our integrity, it's a matter of living the truth that is Jesus Christ. That if Jesus sends us out in the world to love one another as he has loved us, and we say, yeah, I'm going to do that, that we actually go out into the world and love one another as he has loved us. No less, no cut corners, no lack of integrity. That we commit to one another the level that Jesus committed to us. No cut corners, no lack of integrity, no, well, I was just saying something. When we were in Russia, we had somebody who was supposed to be helping us, and he was an elder at a church, and he was supposed to be helping us. He was supposed to help us for a month. Then one day he says, his month hadn't even started yet. One day he says, hey, can y'all get me a ride down to the train station? I got to get back to Moscow and get on a plane and go home. And we're like, you said you were going to help, because we'd had this issue where one of the other missionaries had to leave suddenly, and he was supposed to fill in for a month while I kind of figured out how we were going to deal with a lack of a part of our team. And he goes, oh, I was just saying stuff. And got on the train. I was just saying stuff. What does Jesus say about that kind of an attitude? Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything less is of the devil. That's how seriously Jesus takes us giving people our word. Anything less is of the devil. And we were incredibly disappointed. Not just, well, for one, we knew, okay, now we can never just take what this guy says, because he could just, I was just talking. He wasn't just talking. That's just, he chickened out. We have to be people of our word, because there are people who depend on us being people of our word. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. And remember that anything less is of the devil. Be who you say you are going to be. Okay? So, this first passage here, John 14:6, we don't even have to turn over there. We know this one well. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but by me. Don't compromise. This is part of our integrity. Don't compromise on that truth. Jesus is the one who sets the standard. Not me, not us, not Christianity. Jesus sets the standard. What is truth? And then live your life by that truth, even when it hurts. And Jesus promised sometimes it will. Sometimes it will cost you to be honest. It will cost you to be loving. It will cost you to be forgiving. Do it. Jesus will cover the cost, and he will reward you with dividends. Make the investment in the truth. Live by it, and let him be your standard. And if something comes up that's hard where you would rather lie, tell the truth anyway. And if you need to, Jesus has said that it's totally fine if you say, I'm sorry, I didn't want to tell you that, Jesus made me do it. That's fine. Jesus said that's fine. He said, listen, if they're mad at you because of something I told you to do, I take that. That's what he told us. It's right there in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, I'll take that, but you go do the right thing. Stand up for what's right, be the truth, do the truth, speak the truth, live the truth, and I'll take it. From there, you just go with it, all right? So let him be the one who sets the standard. Let's look at 3 John real fast. 3 John 3 and 4. And for those of you who are worried because you're not familiar with 3 John, that looks like I put up chapters. I promise those are just verses. 3 John 3 and 4. It's one of those books that's so short, you've got to be careful not to turn past it 3 times. Verse 3. This is John writing to some Christians, and he says to Gaius and the church there, for I was very glad when fellow believers came and testified to your fidelity to the truth. That's integrity. How you are walking in the truth. Look at what he says as an apostle. I have no greater joy than this, to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Jesus has no greater joy. The Father also has no greater joy. The Spirit has no greater joy than when we're walking in the truth, when we're walking with Jesus, when we're living by what he teaches us and challenges us to be, even when it's hard, that we're faithful people, people of integrity. And then Hebrews 5, 13 and 14, let's look there. It adds another dynamic to this that helps build our character. And I'm going to read this from the Christian Standard, but then I'm going to have to tell you a little bit about the NIV because I like its wording a little bit better. And verses 13 and 14. Now everyone who lives on milk is inexperienced in the message about righteousness because he is an infant. And he's just saying, sometimes we're not as grown up as we ought to be. And if we're just still living on milk, we're never going to quite have that level of character, never going to have that depth of integrity, never going to have that life of truth because we're still living like spiritual infants, okay? He's challenging them to be better. But solid food is for the mature, for those whose senses have been trained to distinguish good and evil. Their senses have been trained to distinguish good and evil. Well, how do I get my senses trained to distinguish between good and evil? I think the NIV's interpretation of this makes it clearer. He says, who through constant use have trained their consciences. In other words, you put it into practice. You live by it. Even if you don't understand it fully, if you don't know why God's pushing you that hard, you do it anyway. And through constant use and practice, through living your faith, you learn your faith. Through living your faith, you build up your faith. Through the practice of honesty, through the practice of love and mercy, through the practice of forgiveness, through the practice of whatever it is that you're tempted to throw to the side. It's through that practice that you come to understand the value and gain the strength and become better at it. Isn't that true of pretty much everything anyway? It's true of our faith as well. You hear the truth from Jesus, you hear his challenges on how to live, and you say, okay, I don't know, that's harder than what I've been doing. Try it anyway. Do it anyway. Okay? If you can learn how to smoke a Texas-level brisket through practice, and you have to go through a couple of tough ones usually to get there, you can do this. But you don't get to really, where else is it better? Texas levels of brisket by saying, I think that's too hard. Cutting corners and ending up with just shoe leather. I've had a couple of those where people cut corners. Blah, horrible stuff. You get there through practice. You get there through gained skills. You get there through learning tricks. Is it not the same thing with Christianity? It is, isn't it? Put it into practice. Learn from those who have already been through it and learn there's life hacks to Christianity. Learn some of those things from people who have gone before you. Solid food is for the mature, for those whose senses have been trained to distinguish between good and evil. We need to be people that can withstand everything Satan will throw, because he will throw, and we get there by being people of the truth, with each other, for each other, and helping each other. Let's pray.